who took the Sufi psychology course? A number of people. So in Sufism is associated with many things, beautiful poetry, the whirling, poetry, and the chanting, and all of these things. And those are all components of the method of Sufism. But Sufism in its essence is a spiritual psychology or a spiritual anthropology. It is a teaching about the human state and then a method to transform the human state. It is the spirituality, the spiritual psychology at the heart of the Islamic tradition, you could say. And so the Sufis were those that specialized and mastered that discipline. And there are numerous levels of the self, and usually the Sufis will go into 7, but there are 3 main ones. And then those main 3 have different shades and gradations. So the summary of book 1 is the nafs, or the self. And the first 4 discourses deal with the lower self. Nafs al-amara bisu, as it's called in the Quran. The self that commands, or you could say the compulsive self. It's this self that feels separate and isolated and egotistical and feels that if someone else gains, it's its loss, right? And actually this self at its core, it wants to be worshipped. It wants to be the center of attention. It wants to be God. The great symbol of this in the Quran is Fir'aun, right? Ana rabbukum al-a'la. I am your Lord Most High. It wants to be, the center of everything. Then the second level is called nafs al-lawama, which lawama gets into, it could mean the reproachful self or the blaming self or the accounting self. Allah swears by this self in the Quran. I swear by nafs al-lawama and I swear by Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it's tied to something like Yawm al-Qiyamah. They're tied even in the Quran. It's that self which has a certain dawning of consciousness and strives for good, but it's still pulled back and forth into the light, into the darkness. It's kind of trapped in this push and pull. Sometimes it will make progress, then it will fall. And so it blames itself then. And it has a positive side, but it has a negative side, right? It's positive to call ourselves to account and to have accountability and to be honest with ourselves and to see our shortcomings, because only through seeing them can we remedy them. But also, we know that you can get into the negative side of blame and self-loathing and despair and negative self-worth and things like that. So it's like that. And so this is the human condition, that we're pulled by these. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ called the greater jihad, the greater struggle. He was leaving the battlefield with his companions. He said, we're now leaving the lesser jihad for the greater jihad. They said, what is the greater jihad? When we just put our lives on the line, fighting for truth and for justice. And he said, the greater jihad is the battle which rages inside of each one of us. This is that. Jihad al-Akbar, the greater jihad. And, they give this analogy that there's a wolf of light and a wolf of dark fighting inside of us. And the one that wins is the one that you feed most. The more light you do, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets. But the more darkness we do, the stronger that one gets. And so each one is fighting a battle. There is a war going on inside. No one is safe from. However, the more that you do light, the more that light self becomes predominant. And eventually one attains the nafs al-mutma'inna, the self at peace, the tranquil self. And that is when the war is won. It's a high station. This is the station of the prophets and the saints. And the Prophet spoke about this, sallallahu alayhi, when he said, everyone has a shaitan assigned to them. Yes, you have a shaitan assigned to you. Right? And it has shaitan himself, right? This shaitan assigned to you is a murid of shaitan, Iblis. He's giving him lessons. His tarbiyah is how to lead you astray. If you ever want to read a book about this, which is really profound and also might disturb you, what's it called? The Screw Tape Letters. Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. It's really beautiful. C.S. Lewis is a really gifted writer. And the whole book is the discourse, the letters between Shaitan and his student Shaitan, who's assigned to a certain person. And so he writes back, he said, he said, unfortunately, he started praying. What should I do? But it gets into like the psychology of darkness. There's a lot of insights in that. Yeah, it'll change your life if you read it, You never want to go anywhere without saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Ya Latif. Screw tape letters. It's short and it's really a beautiful book. So we all have this, but you shouldn't necessarily think of Iblis as some horned character and some mythological thing, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Shaitan flows through the veins of the children of Adam like blood. So it's like a force within us towards darkness, towards separation, towards egocentrism, towards arrogance, and towards envy. Arrogance and envy are the primary qualities of Iblis. That's how he fell. Iblis was a great worshipper, abid. There's not a place on earth or heavens or earth that Iblis didn't worship Allah. But when Adam was created, when we were created, the Adamic beings, and Allah commanded him to bow, he couldn't take that because he wanted that place. It was arrogance and envy. May Allah free us of these traits. These traits are the biggest veils on the path. Nah. So the Prophet ﷺ said each one has a shaitan assigned to them, and they said beautifully, even you, Ya Rasulullah? He said, yes, but mine has become Muslim. Becoming Muslim, as we know, means to submit. Mine has surrendered. So it is possible to get to a point where that pull away from the light gives up. This is what it means to be a Muslim, to be in a perfect state of submission and surrender to the light of reality. Yeah. Being Muslim is not just one word. Being Muslim is not just something you're born into. It's a high reality. May we really be Muslims, inshallah. Ameen. So this is the struggle. And so we'll get into this more. This whole week we'll be unfolding these levels. So if this is a new concept, don't worry. But the first story wants to explain the essence of the human condition. As he said, it is the very essence of our inward state. The word he actually used, the word for marrow, like bone marrow. It's the marrow of our inner state. And so what is this story? I'm just going to summarize it and then we'll talk about the symbolism. Okay, so while you're listening, know that what the story is about outwardly is all symbolism of the human condition. So you can try to think of what represents what, inshallah. So the story is that there was a great king. And Maulana says, in olden time there was a king to whom belonged the power temporal and also the power spiritual. And so this king goes out hunting one day. And as he's traveling through the land, he spies a handmaiden. And he falls in love with her instantly. Love at first sight. And he purchases her. And he takes her back to his kingdom. But immediately she falls ill. She falls ill, and she falls so ill that each day she gets more sick, and it appears that she may even die. And because he loves her so much, he's deeply distraught by this, and so he calls the best physicians in the land to come heal her. And they all come, and he says, please heal her. Not only her life is in your hands, but my life is in your hands. Because if she dies, I might as well die as well. And the physicians say, we will heal her. We're the best physicians. But then Rumi says, but they didn't say, inshallah. And then he says beautifully, he says, I don't just mean the words, inshallah. I mean the reality, inshallah. The reality of knowing that everything is by and from God. Meaning they thought they were doing it by themselves. And so every medicine they gave her made her more sick. And so the king became more and more worried, and he started to feel there was no one else he could turn. And so he runs to the mosque. he runs to the mosque and he falls prostrate in prayer and he starts to weep to Allah, asking him to heal her. And Rumi says he wept until his prayer mat was soaking wet. Right? This profound image of just burning grief, nowhere else to turn. And he's praying so sincerely that he just becomes physically exhausted and he falls asleep there on his prayer mat. And he has a dream. And in the dream, this great sage comes and says to him, I will come tomorrow and I will heal her. And he wakes up and he knows this is a true dream. Right? Some dreams we have, they're just, who knows what they are, but some dreams you have and you know that was from a higher level of inspiration. That was a true dream. We know by how it feels. There's this impact that it has on us. And he knew that. So he went to his castle and he looked for when this sage would come. And when he sees him coming, he runs out to meet him, barefoot, right? Humility, not even sending his courtiers or his army. He meets him himself and he embraces him. And they have this beautiful meeting, this spiritual meeting. And actually, there's a line where he says, you're my beloved, not her. Like he kind of has this realization, wait a second. But anyway, this is just a momentary kind of intuition that he starts to have. And then this sage says, and Rumi calls him the spiritual physician, the spiritual healer. He says, take me to this girl. And so he goes and he says, remove everyone from the room so it's just empty and I may be alone with her. And so he goes to her and he starts to take her pulse. And he sees she's very weak and very ill. And then he just talks to her gently. And he says, where are you from? And where is your family from? And what is your name? And what do you do? And how have you been? And she starts to tell him. And he sees no pulse change. And then he said, well, where were you before? And she said, first I was in this town and I had this master. And then I was in this town and I had this master. And nothing changes. And then keeps going. And so finally she says, and before that I was in Samarkand. Samarkand. He notices the pulse change. He says, okay, tell me about Samarkand. Oh, this was what I was doing. This is what I was doing. Eventually, he says, and where did you used to go? And basically he's leading her to what is really the root of her ailment. And through this, he finds that she was in love. She is in love with a goldsmith in Samarkand. And he understands that her ailment is heart sickness. It's not physical. That's why they tried to heal the physical. They could not do anything because it's a spiritual ailment that she had. And so he goes to the king and he says, he doesn't tell him why, but he says, you must bring the goldsmith from Samarkand and shower on him riches and tell him to come. So he brings him and then he unites them. He weds them, the girl and the goldsmith, and she comes back to health. And for some time, she is healthy and she is happy. But then the spiritual physician, he creates a concoction, a potion, that he starts giving to the goldsmith, slowly. And this potion starts to make the goldsmith sick. And he starts to lose some of his strength and some of his power and some of his handsomeness. He was very handsome. And all of a sudden, the girl starts to be like, I'm not feeling him as much anymore. Right? His strength is leaving him. His handsomeness is leaving him. Right? The beautiful color in his cheeks is leaving him. He's looking pale. And slowly he weakens. And slowly, as he weakens, her love diminishes. And in the end, the spiritual physician kills the goldsmith. Scandalous. You weren't expecting that, huh? I thought he was supposed to be spiritual. And Rumi has a whole section about that. He said, don't judge things by the outward. If you did, you would be like Moses when Khidr did what he did, and you said you would, right? But he said the spiritual physicians, there's something else happening. So anyway, what is he getting at? Because as we said, all of this is symbolic and not related to the outward meaning. So, does anyone care to venture a guess as what the king represents?
I can try.
Bismillah.
I think I have an idea. I think the king represents the creator,
Okay.
God.
Good guess. Anyone else?
Lust.
A lust? What'd you say?
Lust. Lust.
Good guess. Alhamdulillah. So, anyone else? The king comes and he comes into the hunt, and this represents the ruh, the spirit. And this represents the spirit, which is our true nature, which is from the divine breath and is related to the divine, and in fact is a mystery. It is a mystery. And the Quran says, they ask you about the spirit, say the spirit is from the divine command. And you have been given of it knowledge only a little. Or only few have been given a knowledge of it, is another reading of that. And so the spirit is our true nature. The spirit is from the divine breath, and it is our fitrah, our original disposition. But this going on the hunt means it goes on a journey, and it leaves the divine presence and comes into this world. And it spies the handmaiden. What do you think the handmaiden represents?
Us.
Which aspect of us? Because the spirit is also us.
The physical us.
Yes. The nafs. The nafs, and in this part, of course, the nafs has many dimensions and many levels, but particularly in the beginning, it's the nafs in its undisciplined, unrefined state, right? And this is beautiful because if you think about this, our spirit falls in love with our individual selfhood, right? This individual mission that we have in this world, right? And the scholars, some of them, Ibn Arabi talks about that each one of us, when we were in our spiritual realm, that we were asked, or we were actually given the option of our soul's mission in this world. And we accepted, right? To be born in this family, with these circumstances, and these challenges, and these opportunities for the lesson of our soul to learn. And so the spirit actually comes in, and it's happy, it's in love. Because this is a beautiful gift that Allah has given us, this being embodied, being a human being. Right? As the Buddhists say, the priceless opportunity of a human birth. It is. It's a priceless opportunity to be a human being. And so we come into this embodied nature, right? So this embodied nature. But the problem is that our lower self is in love with other than the spirit, isn't it? So what do you think this goldsmith represents?
The world.
Yeah, the world. The dunya, all that glitters. Gold, right? So the lower self is in love with the dunya, and the dunya means the lower world. There are two words in Arabic for the world. There's alim and dunya. Dunya is always negative. Dunya is the illusory world. It is the world that is, to the extent that it's cut off from remembrance of its higher purpose. Alim is positive. It means the world also. But alim, it's actually from the same root as ilm, knowledge. And so the alim is the place of knowledge, the place you attain knowledge, right? And so in the Fatiha, which we recited, Rabbil Alameen, doesn't say Rabb Dunya. Allah is the Lord of all the worlds. This world is a beautiful place to the extent that we see it as a sign, as a place of attaining knowledge of the divine. But to the extent that we are veiled from that, it becomes a hardship for us. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he said, this world and everything in it is cursed except for remembrance of God. And that which assists you to remember God, and the teacher and the student. So you could say on the surface of this, is like walk around, everything is cursed and everything is evil. But if you listen to this, what the Prophet is saying, it's all about us as an individual and our perspective. Because another way of saying is nothing in this world is cursed if you remember Allah by it. It's merely our ability to perceive. Because it's like this, and the Prophet also gave the analogy of a dream, that people are sleeping, when they die, they wake up. If you enter into a dream, but this dream is unique because there is something we're sent into it for. And the way that we are in it impacts our state when we awaken. So if you forget that it's a dream and it becomes everything, and you're trying to amass things in the dream, and right, then when you wake up, what regret you will be filled with. Right? It doesn't matter how many coins you had in the dream. Right? You're collecting coins in the dream, then you wake up, nothing. How much remorse would you be filled with? But if you remember it's a dream, and that this dream is a school that we're teaching and we're learning and we're growing, then every experience becomes blessed, even more difficult experiences. So this is the idea, is that our lower self, it's cut off. It doesn't see the higher purpose, and so it just wants to attain things, and it wants to gather things, and it becomes love with all that's perishing. Now, what do you think the spiritual physician represents? Feel free to just say. Teachers, beautiful. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dhikr, beautiful. All of these meanings are possible, and all of these meanings are true. It could be said that the spiritual physician represents the awakened ones. Of course, chief amongst them, the prophets, peace and blessings be upon them, and their true inheritors. This is a central theme of the Mathnawi, is that love is the essence of everything, and the divine reality is love, and the purpose of life is love, and the medicine is love. And that you need someone who has awakened to love to awaken you to love. And the term in Arabic, insan al-kamil, which means a complete human being. Someone who has reached completion, or who has ripened, or who has been cooked. We all have this in potential, but until we reach that state, we've not reached that perfected state, or that completed state. And Rumi, the Sufism in general, emphasizes the importance of companionship on the path with those who have progressed, and especially of the masters. May Allah always keep us with them and guide us to them, inshallah. And so, this is what the spiritual physician can represent. Now, it's very interesting, the actual medicine that the spiritual physician gave, because first, what happens? What does the master do? Actually unites the girl with the goldsmith. So, and lets them love each other. But then slowly with the potion, teaches them that the true beloved is not what you thought it was. And so what the spiritual master's role is to do is to teach us that what our soul craves is love, is divine love, is eternal love. But the soul that is not yet spiritually mature and has not gone through the path, it mistakes love of the fleeting and the perishing and the finite for love of the infinite and absolute and eternal. And this is all our woes and all our suffering and all our difficulties in life is because of this. Right? And so, beautifully they're united with them, but then slowly, the spiritual master, and this is why Rumi's way is the way of love, is teaching you about love in its true reality, so that you come to see that everything that you love in the world is like a mirror reflecting some of the divine names and attributes, but that thing is not the ultimate source of what you love. So for instance, Rumi says in Fihi Ma Fihi, in some of his lectures, that everything that is beloved is the divine beloved. And whatever it is called in this world, it is actually Allah that is loved. Whether it's called mother, whether it's called father, whether it's called wife or husband, whether it's called son or daughter, whether it's called wealth, whether it's called fame, whether it's called power, whatever people love is actually the divine reality. And seeing the traces of those divine names reflected in that thing. Right? So to give an example, Allah, inna Allah jamilun yuhibbu jamal. Allah is beauty itself and loves beauty. So if we see a beautiful rose, or a beautiful sunset, or a beautiful face, or a beautiful voice, what we're seeing is the trace of the divine name in that thing manifested. But most people are veiled from the divine by that thing. And so what we're called to on the path, because the path, the essence of the path is Tawheed, La ilaha illallah, no God but God. Seeing that everything is reflecting, is a sign pointing back to that which is beyond it, right? And so everything we love is the divine. Also, one of the divine names is Al-Qawi, Al-Mateen, strength, power. Anything, if we love the strength or the power or the majesty of a mountain, we're loving the divine reality reflected in that thing. If we love justice and people that manifest justice, Allah's name is Al-Adl, the just. Anything that we love ultimately is the trace or the reflection of the divine reality manifested in that thing. That is the core teaching here. Now that doesn't mean that we don't love that thing that manifests the reality, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever has not thanked people has not thanked Allah. So we actually appreciate more when we see beauty, when we see justice, when we see strength, because we actually witness that we're witnessing the traces, the reflection of the divine reality, just a drop from the infinite ocean of them in this world. Right? This is what we're called to. And even people that chase things that, right, people that chase wealth, Allah is al-Razaq, infinite abundance. So they're trying to get wealth on the stock market and all these things, and everybody who's trying to attain money. We could say it's misplaced love the way they're doing it, but they're ultimately seeking Allah. Everyone's seeking Allah, right? So one of our teachers said, if you meet an atheist, he always says, I don't believe in the God you don't believe in too. I don't believe in the God you don't believe in too. Right? Because everyone is worshiping. You cannot not worship. Everyone is seeking. Even a lot of, right, maybe people like who are activists and they say we deny God, right? But we're working for justice. You're worshiping Al-Adl. You may deny it, but you are. You can't get out. You can't get out, right? It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. You can't escape slavery, but you can choose your master. So everyone is worship. And Ibn al-Arabi very beautifully, he says, the Arif, the knower of Allah, never hears a song or a poem that is not about Allah. Right? So the people of Allah, especially like love songs and love poetry, it's all about Allah. Even if the one writing it didn't realize that. Right? So one of them was in a car. We heard from the driver that he was driving one of the sheikhs around, and this was in the Arab world. And he was new and he didn't really know much about the path. He was just a driver at first, but he had the song on and on the radio and in the Arab world. You know all the love songs? They all have the same chorus. Ya Habibi, Ya Habibi. Oh beloved, oh beloved. Of course, they're like love songs. So he was playing this in the car and he noticed, he said the sheikh was crying. So he thought, he was like, oh no, what have I done? Maybe I should turn the music off. The sheikh said, no, don't turn it off. He said, it's just about the divine beloved. He was moved. So he heard this. So everyone hears what they're capable of hearing, but this is all that's happening all the time. This is all that's happening all the time. And so Rumi very beautifully is in a certain sense lovingly saying, and he says actually in this, he says, love of this or that both of them will lead you beyond. So love itself is a force, even though at first it may be misplaced love. Once it starts to awaken in your heart, eventually it will draw you up into the divine presence, because love is one force, right? Now we need discernment on the path with love, right? Because, people loving wealth and loving power, quote unquote love, they are shedding blood and sowing discord upon the earth. Right? So if we do not have discernment and transformation of ourselves, we will actually be trapped in the illusions of love. And we will seek beloveds other than the divine beloved. Nah. May Allah purify us and give us true love, inshallah. Ameen. So this is what Rumi is getting at, and this is what the spiritual masters are telling us. Now, Rumi has a beautiful analogy elsewhere where he says the warrior gives his son a wooden sword to prepare him to be a warrior. And this little boy is running around. In his mind, he's the greatest warrior, swinging his sword, his wooden sword. And one day the sword breaks. And his heart breaks with it, because now, what am I? I'm not a warrior. So he runs to his father, Baba, Baba, my sword broke. And his father smiles. He said, I've been waiting for this day, because now it's time for a real sword. Right? And then Rumi says, so count it a blessing when loss comes your way in the lane of love, when your heart gets broken. Because after that practice, you will learn to love the true beloved. So Rumi is saying that everything we love in this world, it's practice. We're awakening love. But everything in this world, unless we attach the love of that thing to the divine, it will break our heart. Right? Even people we love, like our parents, our grandparents, even if it's no fault of their own, they break our hearts when they leave, don't they? Right? Because loss of love, loss of the beloved is so painful. But this is really the teaching, is that whatever traits were in them that they were reflecting of the divine light, they're never actually gone, because that light is eternal. Ameen. So may Allah give us true love, and may Allah be our true beloved. And so the Sufis have a story that there's a young boy, a young man, and he wants to take the spiritual path. He has this inspiration put in his heart. And so he goes to this sheikh and he says, will you take me as your student, take me as your disciple on the path? And the sheikh looks at him and he says, have you ever been in love? He said, no. He said, go fall in love and then come back. If you haven't fallen in love, this path cannot help you. And so love is love. Love is love. Now Rumi will give and Rumi's path and the path of the Sufis is called Mazhabi Ishq, the path of love. Ishq is also, it means love, but it really means like intense love. It's not just love, nice love. It's like the fire of love. Ishq, passionate love. And they talk about ishq majazi and ishq haqiqi. So this means metaphorical love and true love. And so metaphorical love is love of anything that we take as our beloved other than Allah, when we think that's the object of our love. It's metaphorical because it is reflecting some of the divine light itself, but the true beloved is always Allah. This is one of the core teachings of the Sufis. But of course, as a doctrine, it's one thing to understand this intellectually. It's another thing to embody this as our experiential knowledge. So may we be those that know Inshallah. So the goal here, of course, for all of us is to love the Eternal One. And so Rumi says this at the end, just to read a few of these lines. He says, "This world is the mountain, and our action the shout. The echo of the shouts come to us," right? If you're ever in a mountain and you yell, the echoes come back. So he's saying whatever you put out, it's going to come to you. And he said this was the last word of the goldsmith as he died. So even the goldsmith, right, the dunya itself is communicating this. He said this, and at the moment went under the earth. The handmaiden was purged of pain and love, because love of the dead is not enduring, because the dead one is never coming to us. Love of the living is every moment fresher than the bud in the spirit and in the sight. Choose the love of that living one who is everlasting, right? Allah is al-hayy. Allah is life itself. And we are able to participate in that, right? We have a drop of that life that Allah gave us. Our very life is this divine attribute. Our will, our power, our knowledge, all of it. Choose the love of that living one who is everlasting, baqi, who gives you to drink of the wine that increases life, asaqi, it rhymes. Choose the love of him from whose love all the prophets gain power and glory. Do not say we have no admission to that king. When you are dealing with the generous, things are not difficult. So this is how he closes that first discourse. So this is the core teaching that we want to emphasize first. This is what he wants to emphasize, because he tells us this is the essence of our state. And so we have to slowly wean ourselves from love of the perishing and love of the illusory. And the way to do so is not just by all this fasting and all this hard action. That's important. But it's important that it's done with love. And our teachers told us that 2 cycles of prayer done with love is better than 1,000 done out of obligation. The essence should be love. It's from love, and it's for love, and it's to love. And may we be the true lovers who are drawn near to the Divine Beloved. Ameen, ameen.